Okay, Abby, I believe we can start.
Welcome, everyone. Where I'm calling from, it's good morning. So good morning, good afternoon, good day. Welcome to the Faith for Earth Dialogue, Grassroots Interfaith Action for Climate Justice panel. We're so glad that you're here. If you're joining us and you can, we'd love to have you introduce yourself in the chat so that we have a sense of where people who people are and where you're coming from. So if you'll share your name, your faith tradition or spirituality, and then where you're calling from in the chat, we'd love to have you do that. You can also use that chat box for entering questions or comments throughout the program today. And I also invite you to keep yourself on mute throughout our time together. So welcome again to Grassroots Interfaith Action for Climate Justice. My name is Abby Mohop, and I'll be moderating the panel. Please use the chat for questions or comments, and we'll do our best to respond. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to begin with a keynote address from Nicholas Hagelberg. And Nicholas Hagelberg is a senior program officer at the UN Environment, where he's the coordinator of UN Environment's sub-program on climate change. His work includes setting the strategic direction of the sub-program, the program oversight, and the progress review and fundraising. Previously, Nicholas worked as coordinator for the Healthy and Productive Ecosystems sub-program in the UN and in the Natural Resources branch at UN Environment. His responsibilities included building a project portfolio on forests and integrated landscape management. Nicholas was also part of the team that established the global UNREDD program and the UNREDD country program in Tanzania and Vietnam. Prior to joining UN Environment, Nicholas worked with various organizations in the development sector, including a small NGO, a consultancy company, and WWF. Nicholas, thank you so much for your words, and take it away.
Thank you, Abby. Abby, can you tell me when you see the presentation on your screen?
We can see it now.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really great to meet you all and all the participants that I didn't meet. So hi to you. I'll do a whirlwind through a little bit of the situation and then coming into a few recommendations for faith-based organizations. So going back a few months, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with its first report or part of the sixth assessment report. And next Monday, there will be the second part of this sixth assessment report coming out. And I'm afraid that the information about where we are in terms of climate change is very clear. We're in the midst of human-induced climate change, which can be felt across all over the world, and some of these changes are already irreversible. If we look at the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere, these have been going up by 1.4% every year over the last decade, and we're now at atmospheric concentrations that haven't been seen for millions of years. So this is happening. It's also happening in terms that those atmospheric concentrations are heating up our climate, and we are already now at above 1 degree or warmer climate compared to pre-industrial areas. And the 2017 to 2021 was the...
He wanted to.
That's why he
wanted to.
That's why he came back.
Came back. That's why he came back. And that's why he wasn't invited back.
Please keep yourself on mute.
Abby, I take it that that wasn't the question.
It was not a question, I think.
Excellent. And then the best climatologists and meteorological offices in the world are assessing that there is a 40% chance that in the next 5 years, at least one of those years will be more than 1.5 degree warmer than pre-industrial times. And this is something that we have not seen for at least 2,000 years, not even a peak like this. So the warming is definitely happening. So what are we doing about this? I already showed you that the emissions have not peaked yet. So then let's look at the ambition of countries. The graph you see in front of you is the emission gap report, emission gap graphic, and it shows you that the ambition that countries have communicated to the climate convention, even if we would implement it fully, we are still heading towards a more than 2.5 degree average warming. And for us to get back on a 1.5 degree trajectory, we would need to increase that ambition by 7 times. So we have a lot to do. The good news, and there's always good news as well, is that there's been a clear increase in net zero announcement in the last 24 or so months. And if all of those would be implemented, then we're heading towards 2.1 to 1.9 degree average warming. Then coming into solutions, the good news is that we can close this gap. If you look across 6 sectors, energy, industry, transport, agriculture and waste, buildings and forests, we can, with tested, with cost-effective solutions, we can cut down these emissions while we will deliver jobs and improve health and so forth. Then looking at how these sectors are implementing, we are seeing a really good progress on renewable energy. And just 10 years ago, very few people would have been imagining that the prices of renewable energy is falling as it has. And now, in most parts of the world, renewable energy is already the cheapest mode of electricity production. There's also progress on electric mobility. So growth is fast and increasing in pace, and there are already countries in the world where 75% of new sold cars are electric. And I personally believe that this pace is just about to pick up. So I believe that it can be done. We can see S-curve developments on energy, transport and food, and there's early progress in steel, aviation, shipping and buildings, and those were the sectors that were considered very difficult to move forward on. There is still room, obviously, for improvements and for enhanced pace, and especially on how we manage nature, there's room. And I think the faith-based organization have a key role in helping speeding up this transition. So a couple of things where I think faith-based organization can help. It is to use your strong voice and your authoritative voice in building up support for the global movement for climate action. This is support for the youth that have been striking for the last 4 years, for community groups and environmental defenders. So there is plenty for us to do and to support this effort. There's also quite a number of campaigns that try to change consumer behavior. And here I also believe that faith-based organization can help and build up the momentum around just the masses of people taking action. And again, you can help with the reach that you have through your communities. And then the final part that I want to bring to your attention, UN and very often faith-based organizations as well, we tend to work with the poorest part of population and those that are in largest need. But I do want to stress that those are the people that have the smallest environmental footprint. And if you go to the wealthiest 1%, their emissions are double the total emissions of the weakest 50%. So I think it's important that we also focus on how we shape our aspiration. What is it that we want? What are the things that we make us happy? There's $600 billion annually that is trying to get us to consume more, wanting more, all these things. Whereas we have to help guiding people to the small things in life, family, health, exercise, good food, these type of things. And I believe that we would do ourselves a service and the planet a service if we also would increase our attention to the wealthiest part of the segment. And Abby, with that, I would like to hand back to you. So the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Nicholas. I particularly appreciated the way in which you said there's always good news. And as people of faith, that is a thing that we bring to this conversation. There's always good news. Thank you. Next, we're going to see a video on climate change impacts around the world as a visual statement of what people around the world are already experiencing. So, Sophia, I think we are ready for that. And again, a reminder, if you have questions or comments, please do put those in the chat. Thank you.
Climate change affects all continents. We cannot stand back and watch its devastating consequences on the future. Today, climate change affects economy and people, communities and nations. Day by day, we witness how the ocean level rises and how climatic events become more extreme. Our industrial activities are currently producing the highest levels of gas emissions in history, resulting in an increase of 3 degrees Celsius in the Earth temperature this century. And you know the worst part? That this will affect our children directly, and the poor will experience the worst consequences. But the good news is we have solutions within reach. In addition to using renewable energies and urging the international community to adapt to an economy low on carbon, now is your chance to act. We want to improve education and awareness towards climate change and include mitigation policies and political strategies. We want to adopt urgent measures to fight climate change and its effects. Starting today, we're ending.
Sophia, we could hear the video, but we couldn't see it. So I'm wondering if you could put the link to the video into the chat so people can view it later. Thanks. All right. Next on our agenda is hearing from Beth Roach from the Alliance of Native Seed Keepers. Beth is a co-founder of Alliance of Native Seed Keepers, an organization that was formed to keep ancestral seeds alive and to rebuild culture and food security in Native communities. Beth has an extensive background in grants management, conservation, financial management, and organizing. She's also a storyteller. She's a storyteller for her tribe, and her work with Alliance for Native Seed Keepers aligns with her rural and agricultural roots and enables her to contribute to the resilience that is desperately needed in her region, particularly with regard to Native communities and their cultural and food security. So Beth is calling in from North Carolina in North America. And so Beth, take it away.
Nawe Abby, Jwa, Skinaha, Kase Beth Roach from Nottoway Tribe of Virginia, Alliance Native Sea Keepers, and other hats I'll share with you today. First, I'd like to start with our Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, the Gonyak words that come from all else. And I'll be speaking this in our Nottoway language, which we have been working for years on revitalizing. Yukwara huadase ekweheekwe one jugaktikekwa. Yukwara huadase ine honroch one jugaktikekwa. Yukwara huadase awa one jugaktikekwa. We are grateful for the people. I'm grateful for all y'all. You're coming in from all over the world. I'm grateful for your ancestors. I'm grateful for my ancestors. We are grateful for the land, for Mother Earth. We're grateful for all of the sacred lands that you're standing on and all of the sacred lands that my ancestors stand on. And we're grateful for Awa, our water. For all of us, water is life and impacts us all. And we share water all across the globe. Our Thanksgiving address goes on and on and on, and it identifies every element of creation and tells us that we must live in this interdependent relationship and balance and respect always. One jugaktikekwa. With that, we become one mind. So delighted to talk with y'all this morning. I'm going to take you through a journey of my experiences here, show you some of the solutions that we've been developing, and I can't wait to learn more from y'all's. So the Alliance of Native Seed Keepers was born several years ago from two seed keepers, a Tuscarora man and a Monacan man, so two tribes on the eastern seaboard. And they were concerned about a particular Tutelo strawberry corn. That's what brought them together. Both of these seed keepers were doing work for years, but it was realizing that we need more people working on our endangered seeds in order to create a healthy, sustainable population of seeds that can keep going on. This came about around the same time as the Dakota Access Pipeline opposition. I'm sure many of y'all saw at the Standing Rock Reservation, where you've seen an unprecedented in modern time gathering of tribes and faith organizations and just people from all walks of life standing with Indigenous folks against these extractive industries, whether it be oil or frack gas. It's really was something that we hadn't seen in modern times. And so while we were following that and sending as much support as we could, we realized that there were threats that were coming to our communities on the East Coast. So from there, this coalition of woodland nations was organized because we realized we have to be in conversation with each other. No matter who you are or where you're from on the Eastern Seaboard, we've got common threats and concerns. So during that time, we realized movements require a tremendous amount of resources, human, abilities, capacities, financial resources, knowing how to advocate, knowing how to organize, all of these things. And so while we had every bit of spirit and passion behind this work, we realized also that we really needed the mechanical pieces that are going to help move this movement along. And also we realized that a lot of the activists that we're working with we're also seed keepers. We're also people that were doing this work within their own communities. So from there, we realized, okay, well, we can start an organization. And then we expanded. We were not just a Monacan and a Score, but we were Nottoway, Chickahominy, Seneca. I mean, there were many other folks that came into this work. And so we created this Alliance of Native Seed Keepers. And what our mission is that we are, redeveloping our spiritual bonds with our ancestral seeds to, remember our past, prepare for our future, and in order to create a healthy, sustainable life for all of us going forward. If we have strong farms and gardening in our community, that means that we are connected to our agricultural calendar, which essentially is our ceremonial calendar. That means that we are observing the climate season to season. Ask any gardener how the rains are, whether there's too many or too little, when our growing patterns are changing, they're going to be able to tell you. So not only are your activists, your climate change observers, but we're also learning from seeds who are truly the original climate adapters to begin with, showing us that every year they learn a little bit more about the environment, and therefore that's all we have to keep growing them so they continue to evolve as well. So our model is we are inspired by benefit corporations that are creating opportunities for funding for communities that are doing important work, while also creating an intentional way to distribute and share seeds. So we have a store that sells already commercialized seeds, anativeseeds.com. We're creating entrepreneurial avenues for folks that if they want to sell seeds that are already commercialized, that's fine. We'd love to give them above market price. And really, this work is funding the work on the ground, which is to grow these endangered seeds, get them to healthy numbers, get them back in the hands of our Indigenous communities. And we're in our year 3, so we're very much in startup mode, but we are seeing our reach truly expand, and we're very excited about that. So it was through this work that I became connected to the Women's Earth Alliance and Sierra Club's U.S. Grassroots Accelerator. And so I applied. It was the first year in the U.S. was in 2019, and it brings together women environmental leaders from all different sectors: agriculture, energy, health. I mean, it's just a really wide sector of women that are needing to, they have a solution. It's not as if we're sitting around wondering what the solution is. We have a solution in our minds, and we really just need to accelerate that. Like, we need a plan. We need support. We need amplification. We need to learn from each other. And so this program is designed for women to come together for 4 months, learn from each other collaboratively, because we all have so much to teach each other, while also really diving in and figuring out, what do I need to really advance this work? So for the Alliance of Native Seakeepers, it was really incredible. We went from an idea, from a small apartment, satellite garden sites, to now we have gotten land and gotten some of these heavy initiatives really moving. Can't underscore that power of collaboration enough. This was carried over to me when 2 years ago was able to be a part of a launch of a project in the shared waters of Virginia, North Carolina. So we are your first contact nations. From the 1500s, Europeans have been coming here. The English colonized 400 years ago. So particularly in Virginia, North Carolina, we have had 200 years of crown occupation from the British Empire, and then 200 years of this newly formed United States government. And over those 400 years, we've been heavily, our narratives and histories have been deeply impacted, from loss of land, loss of culture, loss of language, loss of identity, loss of just community. And so what I've been seeing in my lifetime is this massive resurgence and resilience of our communities. Interesting to note that in America, the Native American Religious Freedom Act was passed in 1978. So really, it's only been over 40 years that legally we've been able to really be publicly who we are, and to be in our spiritual way without a law governing that. So imagine that. This Tribal Coastal Resilience Project has started with funding from the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a team of scientists, policy experts, researchers, and tribal leaders. And what we're doing is looking at tribal climate and coastal adaptation plans from across the United States, Turtle Island, and seeing what's working well and what we might want to adapt in our communities. I'll take one example for you. This is a wampum model developed by Dr. Kelsey Leonard. She's a Shinnecock woman. This article came out a year ago. I'll drop the link in the chat. It's takes us through what an indigenous adaptation to sea level rise might look like. And so I'll wrap with an example from Nottoway. So the W, it's an acronym, means witness changes in behavior. So what changes in animal or life behavior are you seeing? For us, Nottoway, 10 years ago, we started a river cleanup, and we noticed the first year we picked up enormous amounts of trash, 30 tires, like 2 trailers full of trash, a whole bathroom suite, so a sink, a shower, and a commode. And that was the first year. So we cleaned like all of this stuff. And then a year after year, for a few years, it's a fishing area. So we would clean, plastic bins from bait or any other kind of fishing line, things like that. Well, after the year 5 or 6, we started picking up very, very old trash. Why is there old trash? Well, we learned that there was an expansion of logging in our area for wood pellets. So they're chopping our trees, they're reducing them down to wood pellets, and they're shipping them over to Europe to be burned for energy. Well, that got us seeing what this local situation was happening and how that's impacting us worldwide. So that was the first witness, but acknowledge your ancestors. So we were down at that site because it's an historically and culturally important place of our ancestors. It combines two parts of our former reservation. We've been fishing there for thousands of years. There's old fishing weirs. And so we're down there to pay respect to our ancestors, and we see this current problem. Mending is your M. And so how do you find solutions? Well, in my mind, it comes around to land back, which means many different things. And so it could be land and ownership back to tribal communities. It can mean co-management of that land. And it's also the restoring of the narrative of our stories, getting that back into the frame. And so we are actively looking to secure land, because then nobody can touch it. We are working with partnerships with people like the Nature Conservancy who do own land, and how do we co-manage the resource? And we're also doing something like this today, which is what we're out here telling our stories. We're doing this to protect our future generations, and so that they can have a place to come home and see who they are, who our ancestors are, and to remind themselves of their heritage. We have to do this by uniting, we have to unite with everybody in our watershed. So all of the streams and tributaries and creeks and rivers, we're all part of a system. And within that system, we have industry, we have private citizens, we have tribal, local, state, federal government. We have all of these folks, that are here. So we really do keep the whole system in mind, and we want to work with everybody. And finally, the M was probably the hardest letter for me to come around, and it's move. Because nobody wants to hear you have to move from the place that you love. That's probably one of the hardest things about coastal climate change is, that people are going to have to retreat. So I was like, I don't know how to deal with that. But when I started to think in a much larger, broader, longer scale, I remembered that our people have been migrating for thousands of years. We started the Yucatan Peninsula in central Mexico, and we came up to the Midwest. We went up to the Great Lakes. We went back to the Midwest, and now we're on the Eastern Seaboard. So this is not unusual. We move around during seasonal uses of land, so that's not unusual. But I think one of the things that we're taking away from this is that we have to move beyond what that snapshot in time is when colonization happened, and really think about what does it look like to reform our communities with our cultural bonds, and really take a progressive and proactive look at where can we settle in the present and the future, so that we can continue these practices in a very proactive way. So that's a lot. Thanks you all, Nawe, for letting me be a part of this conversation. Remember that it's all about people, land, and water. And if we keep those three things in mind, we're going to continue to find the solutions. So Nawe.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much. If there's a way for us to stay in touch with your work, would you put that way into the chat so folks can follow up with you? Thank you so much. Okay. So we've heard a little bit about grassroots action on climate justice from North America, from Beth Roach. And now we're going to hear about grassroots action from the Africa continent, from people of faith, from Marian Wara. And Marian Wara is the co-facilitator and coordinator of Green Faith International. Based in Nairobi, Kenya, she has worked with the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, where she coordinated climate justice policy advocacy in 8 African countries, and served as program officer for gender, environment, and climate change for the Interreligious Council of Kenya. Marian, take it away.
Hi. You gotta try that shower.
Thank you so much, Abby, and good luck with the
shower.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Please have a warm, safe, and green shower, whoever that is. So yes, my name is Marian Wara, as I've been mentioned by Abby. I work with Abby at Green Faith, and I am a Seventh-day Adventist, a Christian, and I come from Kenya. I live in Nairobi. And so I'm grateful to have this opportunity to talk to you today and to be part of this conversation. And I'm grateful to my sister Abby for moderating this panel. And so I just want to say that faith is the anchor that holds all of us together. And because we come from different faiths, we believe and we have a conviction that protecting the earth is not like an option, but it is a must. Our religious texts give us guidance on how to live in the world and how to craft our leadership with the earth. Each of our religions tell us how to treat the earth and and many living creatures. As in all things, we can use texts of our religion and those of our neighbors to guide us and our communities to make decisions on how to take action on protecting the earth. Having said that, I want to share with you some instances where faith communities came together for the sake of protecting the earth and for the sake of saying no to corporations that want to maximize profit over protecting the earth. And they got some very, very amazing wins. And so I want to start by saying that I believe that all of you now have heard about a coal mine that was proposed to take place in Kenya some time back. And they wanted to have a coal plant in a place that is rich with biodiversity, is rich with water, is rich with, soil for farming and communities that are living there. And for a long time, civil society organizations came together and opposed it, but the government and the corporations were adamant until faith communities came together and faced the government and said, you're not going to displace communities and you're not going to destroy the earth. And after that, we saw the court saying they are stopping. So right now, I know that Rachel Marsh knows that there's this East African crude oil pipeline that is being proposed to take place in Uganda and Tanzania. I know that probably some of you have heard about it. So this is the biggest giant that we have to fight right now. So Green Faith is building power to voices at the grassroots level. Last year, we had a Faith for Climate Justice action that took place in Tanzania. And that happened because faith communities came together and forgot about the fact that there are different faith communities. They forgot about that somebody is a Muslim. They forgot about somebody is a Christian, a Hindu, a spiritual leader or something like that. But they saw one big injustice happening to the earth, and that is what they came together to stop or to say something about. And up to that point, people were so scared of talking about telling the Total to, move on, or telling the government to stop it. But I like using the example of there's nothing that freaks out the government. There's nothing that freaks out corporations, that faith communities standing together. Then a Muslim standing close to a Christian, standing close to a Hindu, standing close to a spiritual leader, and all of them are telling you, you need to stop. That freaks them out. So there's power in coming together, and there's power in grassroots mobilization for the sake of protecting the earth, using your own spiritual conviction and using your own Bible text. So many a times people think that because it is happening to that community, it's not my problem. It is your problem. You are a spiritual leader. You are a faith leader. You are a Christian. You believe in something. So it is your problem. So because of that, we had opposition from police. The faith leaders had opposition from police in Tanzania. They were told that you cannot march around this place, even after the faith communities and Green Faith got the proper permission to have a peaceful march and bring attention of the East African crude oil pipeline to the communities, because communities and families are getting displaced. Some of us here who are in this call who are Africans know the pain you go through when you are relocated and removed away from your home and you're leaving your loved ones buried in that same place. You know, so the question is, if I wanted to go and visit the grave of my loved one, where do I go? So communities came together because faith leaders came together at the grassroots level. And now, as much as they were harassed, as much as they were told by the police that they are, and the government that they are hindering development, they still continue talking about it. And the point of talking about it is not even because they don't want to move. The point of talking about it is because why would you bring a crude oil pipeline in a community that is farming? So when you relocate that community, where are they going to farm? When you relocate the community, what is the compensation looking like? When you relocate that community, what kind of jobs are you going to give them? So the injustices that are being taken care of or that are being imposed on communities in the name of development should stop, and it cannot stop if faith communities and faith leaders will not say something. So because of this, we have an exciting yet instrumental season coming up as Green Faith. We are calling it Sacred Season for Climate Justice. How beautiful is that name? It is a sacred season, but we want to use it for climate justice. So during this season, we are requesting everybody to say something about the season that you're celebrating as a faith person. For my fellow Christians, Easter is coming up. Let's use this time for Easter to say financial institutions are smart enough. Why are they being dumb by polluting the environment, by funding fossil fuels? It doesn't make sense when a smart person acts dumb. All we want to say is that we love you. You have the money. Please don't be stupid. Finance community resilient actions. Finance communities to grow agriculture. Finance communities to have safe water to drink. Finance communities to have affordable, accessible, and just energy access. Finance communities to protect their forests, because for the longest time possible, we have indigenous communities who have lived in harmony with the forest, who have given us medicine from the forest. So here is something that I would invite all of you in this call, so that you can invite your friends also, that when you're celebrating Easter as a Christian, please use your face, use your voice, and ask financial institutions to finance locally led climate actions, to finance women who are doing amazing, smart agricultural products that are feeding communities, not finance fossil fuels that are leaving communities hungry. And I know that we can do it because we are smart and we are people of faith. So I want to leave it there, Abby, and give it back to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marion. Thank you for the language of we are smart and we are people of faith. And so let's put money behind women and climate justice. Thank you. Okay. With that, we're going to take a very small break to listen to some music from Malawi, to get grounded in creativity and joy. During that break, please feel free to add comments or questions in the chat or to stretch your body before we continue in the panel. Thank you so much. Brian, are you able to share the music?
Yeah, apologies. I just had a technical issue and I had to leave and come back in. Could somebody give me authorization to share my screen again, please?
Sophia is working on that, I think. We cannot hear it, Brian.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I think in the interest of time, could you just move on? And if I can get this figured out, then we'll kind of change the order. And if not, then I think it's a sad missed opportunity and I'll provide a link later.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Okay. We're going to move on to hear from the Reverend Dr. Rachel Mash from Green Anglicans, who will share more about grassroots climate action in South Africa.
Thank you, Abby, and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Reverend Rachel. I am based in Cape Town in South Africa, and I want to share this afternoon about one of the campaigns that we ran challenging oil drilling in Namibia. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. Can you indicate if you can see it properly?
Yes, we can see it.
Wonderful. Okay, so this is about grassroots interfaith action. I'm the coordinator for the Anglican Church in South Africa, Namibia, Swaziland, Eswatini, and Lesotho. So this is about what happened when a Canadian oil company called Recon Africa started drilling in the Kavango Basin in Namibia, and this shows you just where Namibia is. So we were contacted by Bishop Luke Patra, the Bishop of Namibia, and he alerted us that the Canadian company Recon Africa had started exploratory drilling in the Kavango Basin. This came as a complete surprise to the Namibian people. They hadn't heard anything. There was no participatory process. The local newspaper, the Namibian Sun, broke the story, and Recon Africa tried to sue them. Now, what would this drilling mean? First of all, it would mean the abuse of indigenous rights for the San people and rural communities in that area. And then a huge danger of pollution of the water in a very dry country. Namibia is the driest country south of the Sahara. And huge problem with the danger of pollution of the Okavango Basin. The Okavango Basin is one of the 7 natural wonders of Africa, a place which is teeming with wonderful creatures. And of course, the climate change impacts of new oil on one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change, like Namibia. The drilling was going to take place in the Kavango Basin, which is the orange area. And as you can see, there was the danger of seepage of the chemicals and pollution through 2 World Heritage sites, the Sodilo Hills and the Okavango Delta. And it is also a migration route for elephants. So what happened? The issue was brought to the Southern African bishops, bishops of 6 countries, and they all wrote a petition which was signed. And then we contacted the archbishops from Canada, and they were invited to sign because it's a Canadian company. And then this petition was handed over to the Namibian consulate in Cape Town. And the petition went online. Now, what then was very fascinating is because the local press, the South African and Namibian press, were worried that they were going to get sued by Recon Africa. Because the Namibian newspaper had got threatened with being sued, there was a story in the National Geographic. They had also been threatened with being sued. But they could freely report on the bishop's story. And fascinatingly enough, this went all over the local South African Namibian press, that the bishops were protesting about the oil drilling. The bishops were calling the Kavango Basin drilling a sin. And then as part of a global day of activism, which Green Faith and other people were organizing, we took part in the Sacred People, Sacred Earth protest and held a silent protest on the steps of St. George's Cathedral. And that was an interfaith protest, silent protest, together with other members of civil society. And this led to ongoing media and social media raising of awareness. Bishop Luke was interviewed by CNN. We then used the Green Anglican social media to amplify the voices of Namibian activists. We then contacted our interfaith friends in Canada, two particular organizations, Kairos Canada and Faith Common Good. And they took this petition right to the doors of Recon Africa in Vancouver. And through them, we made contact with a wonderful Canadian grassroots organization called Grandmothers for Change, and they began to take up the issue. And through their reach, they set up a learning event with a Canadian Member of Parliament, Elizabeth May. And when I heard that they had been able to get hold of one of the Canadian parliamentarians, I must confess, I sat in front of my laptop and I had tears dripping onto my laptop, because suddenly we knew that we were part of a global community that was fighting this thing and we were not alone. Because of their work, 183 organizations called on Canadian officials to hold Recon Africa accountable, and the letter was addressed to the Prime Minister of Canada. On World Water Day, Extinction Rebellion Vancouver held a protest also outside the headquarters of Recon Africa. Still a long way to go, but I think through the bishop raising his voice, through the faith communities coming on board, through our interfaith and international contacts, we were able to bring the voice of the people of Namibia to the global stage. And I also want to add to what Marion has said, is another big issue that is being faced at the moment in Africa is the East African crude oil pipeline. This is a pipeline which is 1,400 kilometers, stretching right through Uganda and Tanzania out to the coast. Nearly a third of the pipeline will run through the basin of Africa's largest lake, Lake Victoria, on which more than 40 million people depend for water and food production. This pipeline is going to cross more than 200 rivers and run through thousands of farms. Just imagine, one spill or leak will have absolutely catastrophic effects on these vital freshwater sources and the millions of people that depend on them. This pipeline, because it is so long, it is actually being warmed. So if there is a leak, the oil will gush out even faster. And over 100,000 people across Uganda and Tanzania face losing the land they live on. This pipeline also threatens one of the most ecologically diverse and wildlife-rich regions of the world. Numerous important habitats and nature reserves. It is home to many iconic and endangered animals. On its way from Uganda to the Tanzanian coast, the pipeline is going to disturb nearly 2,000 square kilometers of protected wildlife habitats, national parks, game reserves, the Bugoma forest. And please remember that zoonotic viruses that move from animals to humans, like COVID, like SARS, like HIV, are the boomerang effect of the destruction of ecosystems. We will reap what we sow. How can we respond as faith communities? We can protest, and one of the important things that we can do is we can move our money. We can divest our money from the institutions, from the fossil fuel companies. We can take our money out of the banks that are funding these projects. I want to end with the words of Proverbs 31 verse 8, which says, "Speak up for those who have no voice." There is nobody on this planet that has no voice. The problem is that they have a voice, but nobody is listening. And we as faith communities can take the voices of the people who are being impacted by environmental degradation, by abuse of land rights, and we can raise it and make it be heard. Speak out for those whose voice is not being listened to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. As we continue in our program, I want to remind you that if you have questions or comments, to please put them in the chat. We'll have a little bit of time at the end of our panel together for question and answers with the panelists. The last presentation on our panel before another video is from Karina Samoroto and Dr. Sophie Robe, and they will be presenting on climate finance. And Sophie is the co-founder and CEO of Find Impact, an Amsterdam-based investment advisory boutique and foundation dedicated to impact investing. And Impact Foundation's mission is to be a catalyst for change. And Karina is an independent researcher and investment consultant who specializes in helping institutional asset owners allocate their capital towards investments that have a positive social and environmental impact. So Karina and Sophie, thank you so much for your presentation today. Take it away.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Thank you very much for inviting us. Abby, thanks for the introduction. We're very honored to be here today. So I'm here with Karina, and she's been very instrumental in producing some of the research and the work we are doing today. So I invited her to speak with me. As just said, by listening to the former talk, I already would have changed completely my presentation. So I'm going to try to stick to the presentation, but I would love to try to give you some added thought I had by listening to what Reverend Rachel Marsh said, and also Marine was very, very inspirational for me to hear. So Find Impact Foundation is a Netherlands-based nonprofit organization, and what, as just said, we really want to mobilize this very large pool of capital, which is currently invested in a very environmental, quite often environmental and socially harmful investment, and we want to move them into investment with a positive social and environmental impact. We really believe that social and environmental go hands in hand. And back in 2020, we started to work on a Faith Impact project, which is a grandfathered project. And we've engaged with a very large group of faith-based organizations across the world, and with the aim to provide practical tools and guidance to help large faith-based organizations so that they can really move their portfolio into a more sustainable portfolio. So in this session today, we would like to highlight and share with you, in this 5 to 10 minutes talk, the importance of the beneficiaries of these assets, the group of sisters who receive their pension for their, or priests for these asset owners with churches, but also the attendees of the participant of the community, but also faith leaders and leaders of grassroots movement to engage with the financial institution who manage their money, or the church directly. Sometimes the assets are managed when they're quite large directly by the church or by the faith organization, and sometimes where they're smaller, they're managed by financial institution. And I would be, linked to what we've heard before, that there is a way to do. So what we're going to talk about that is first, maybe why is finance important as, first point. Then give you maybe some example, and Karina will give you some example how grassroots movement have been able to make a difference to change this portfolio, which is another way to make a change. Give you a couple of examples when this portfolio has been changed of, how does it look like? What type of investment have this faith organization done? And maybe last but not least, give you some idea what can you do to engage with your faith organization on sustainability. Karina, can you move please to the next 2 slides? Why is finance important?
Yeah, is it on?
So why is finance important? I think it's not moving yet, but maybe
Maybe
I
there's
can.
a delay. It's
Oh, you know what? I can move it myself. It's even better. Why is finance important? First of all, we all know that creating this change and filling the SDG costs money. The SDG funding gap has been estimated before COVID and this horrible crisis to $2.5 trillion. This is a tremendous amount that the public sector alone cannot close. Therefore, we think that a lot of private funding is also needed, and without that, we will not achieve our SDG. Next to that, secondly, a lot of the damage has been done on the climate, on the environment, and has been largely a result of the businesses and the business philosophy that prioritize maximizing short-term profit over the long term. So we really want to have, there is a need to create a system change, a change of mindset, to have businesses and financial institutions to start to transform their business practice. And this is a lot of the work we're doing, and which also been done on the UNEP, for instance. So when it comes to faith community, we think that faith-based organizations have a very important role to play. First, they manage a very large portion of the global assets. So if we look at adding all the assets owned by any faith organization in the world, approximately 6 to 8% on this, of the world wealth is managed and owned by the churches under small organization. This money, as I say, is usually managed directly by the churches or by the organization or by financial institution. The faith-based organization, as we know, are intrinsically driven by mission and values in their action, but what's about their portfolio? That's what we're thinking on. And thirdly, if you think about all the different faiths, all the major religions have shared common values. So there's a possibility and an ability to try to work together, to align together to common values and to make a change. So one of the findings, for instance, by looking at Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, Muslim, and Jewish religion, that they actually have common values such as social justice or stewardship of the air, of the earth. So care of God's creation is a value we will find in every single faith. So we believe that the FBOs have a potential to change the world with their investment, and we should really not underestimate this. And this is really part of the work we'd like to bring today. So maybe next slide. And Karina, can I ask you to explain how some grassroots have linked to change on some of the church?
Thanks. Yeah, so now that we know that engaging with financial institutions is important, how can grassroots movements make a difference, and can they make a difference? Well, it certainly can, and it has in the past. So on this slide, just to give you some examples, the first one being the Church of England. So on the climate side, for example, local parishes, church communities, but even congregation members have actually organized themselves and taken a political stand against fossil fuel investments using the church's money. And they've done this in the form of, for example, public campaigning, approaching faith leaders and asking tough questions, but also engaging with the members of the General Synod and getting them to pass motions and climate declarations. So, for example, in 2018, the General Synod actually passed a motion that called on the investing bodies of the church to divest from fossil fuel companies that were not aligned with the Paris Agreement by the year 2023. And this was one of the moves that prompted the Church Commissioners for England, which is one of the largest investing bodies for this church, to engage more intensively with their portfolio companies, but also set hurdles for their investees when it comes to climate targets. And then a second example, as you might see, is the Dutch Protestant Church, the PKN. So their board actually started looking into investing in sustainability funds after the adoption of the Accra Confession in 2004 by the World Alliance of Reformed Churches, which called on the global Reformed community to respond to, if I quote them right, ecological and economic injustices as a matter of faith. And that's how their sustainability journey started. And then a third example would be Australian pension fund Christian Super. So their journey into impact investing has been grown over the years, and it was actually prompted by their clients and their beneficiaries directly and actively asking them, where is my money being invested, and requesting them whether their pension could be invested in not only sustainable things, but also things that were more reflective of Christian values. So yeah, that's the third example. And the fourth example, just to give you a final one, this one's not necessarily driven from grassroots demand in the similar form as the other three, but it is a good example of how faith can be integrated into a responsible investment strategy, the Australian pension fund Crescent Wealth. So it was started by someone from the Australian Muslim community, and he recognized that there was basically a demand and a very significant opportunity for a more ethical form of finance, which was Sharia compliant and also more reflective Islamic values. And that's basically how they got into responsible investing. So just to conclude the slide, basically leaders of faith communities and grassroots movements really have the potential to push the sustainability agenda forward and help to get the right solutions funded. So, thanks,
Thank you
Vicky.
very much. As next, we were talking about some of the grassroots movement, but let me give you a couple of examples of how a faith organization can align their portfolio actually, and actually make a difference in some of the themes which actually Marine was mentioning before. So the Missionary Sisters of Sacred Heart of Jesus, is a mission-driven non-faith-based congregation of sisters of Catholic women, actually based all across the globe and working all across the globe. We are really working to spread Christ's love around the world. And we have successfully aligned most of their portfolio with a Christian value and created an impact allocation, which we would like to showcase today. We really love to build that example. This is quite typical of the journey. And if you go to our website, and maybe Karina can type the link on the website, you can see that we have a numbers of case study which we presented. And we use this case study to help other faith organizations as the best example how to mobilize and to invest along climate and other impact themes. So the Missionary Sisters of Sacred Heart impact investing efforts support a variety of sectors, including education, healthcare, financial inclusion, but also more environmental related themes we've been talking about and also mentioned at the beginning of the first presentation about clean water, renewable energy, but also affordable housing or sustainable agriculture. And we put a couple of logos, but just to give you an idea what type of funds they will be investing in. So one Accra Fund, which helps smallholder farmers in Africa access education, supplies and financing they need to increase crop yield. RECMIFA is a fund which provides loans to support small businesses across 19 countries in North Africa, which actually are one of the least developed countries in the world, which will help create employment and generate income for communities in low resources setting. Several non-profit organizations that focus on responsible financial inclusion for poor community, including Root Capital, Self-Help Credit Union, or Congregation of Religious Women, the RCIF. And next to this direct impact themes, additionally on that, as a result of a lot of climate change, actually what we say climate refugee, in a time of unprecedented mass migration and displacement of persons around the world, the Missionary Sisters, which are inspired by their foundress, St. Frances Cabrini, which has been actually proclaimed the patroness of immigrants in 1950, decide also to invest a part of their portfolio to climate refugee themes. So the impact investing portfolio will focus also on the needs of those which are forced to migrate due to poverty, climate change, lack of work, or racial and religious persecution. And one interesting investment they made was in a fund called the International Rescue Committee Center for Economic Opportunity, which is actually a fund in it's just a financial institution in the United States, was giving loans to sometimes non-documented and refugees to start a new business, so help to cater for micro enterprise and borrower who typically have very limited access to traditional financing. Another example, as Karina mentioned, which is very different from the Church of England, and I'm aware that when we look at a portfolio, we're still not completely disinvest in all, and that's could be a bit an issue which also is quite interesting to discuss. But their current view is we rather invest on trying to change, so invest in certain company and trying to vote against them and let them change and start to really look at human rights and by combining grassroots action with voting action. So I think that is quite an important way to look at. So Church of England targets investment that fall under the themes linked to the 5th mark of mission, which is investment in renewable energy from infrastructure, private equity investment in sustainable agriculture or sustainable forestry. And this investment are actually link them back to the Church 5th mark of mission. And the 5th mark of mission, which is really to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain the renewal of life of Earth. So what we wanted to do with this kind of example was to really show you that there are various mechanisms for which advocacy and engagement on a grassroots level can lead to significant change of portfolios, but also there's a lot of different ways for investors to implement a faith-aligned portfolio. The most effective way for us, the way to align is actually depend on the governance of your faith community and the faith organization. And because all the different organizations have a very different, decision structure. And that takes me to the next point. What can you do? How can you engage with your FBO, your faith organization and your church to get them to similarly create a change like this? So in a nutshell, what we actually think that typically you want to start your effort with a few steps. And the reason why we think we can help you in general is, and we have published all this research, which is available for free on our website, because we are a foundation and we're really trying to help other organizations to make the change. So first of all, the first thing to do is to find out whether your organization and the faith organization manage assets and how are these assets invested. Asking questions. How sustainable is your current portfolio? How much actually fossil fuel exposure do you have? Do they do private market investment in certain funds? Another point is to understand the structure of your faith organization. How are the investment decisions made? Are they outsourced to a financial institution? And then we come back to what we were talking before, or are they also managed in-house by some investment director? And that is once you have that, identify how they're also how they are managed, you may want to identify a champion, an influential figure within the faith-based organization, which is well equipped to support and advocate your message for the organization and also to be the people in charge. And the reason why we mention that is by looking at all the change that's been done, there was always somebody who actually in charge, working in finance, who have been able, or in the board, been able to actually help making the change. It's quite important, actually. We want to leave this legacy, probably one day we'll be living, of being able to change from a non-sustainable portfolio to a sustainable portfolio. Educate yourself, and so that you can educate others. read case studies. I mentioned before, we we publish a very large number of documents. There's around 800 pages of documents, so you can on our website, but it's really helpful to read how others have done, have moved their portfolio, and it would allow you to overcome actually one of the usual objection why you should not move your portfolio into a more sustainable portfolio. One of them being you're not going to have the same return, but we can reassure you that there's enough evidence from an academic point of view, from a practical point of view, that this is not true. And then last but not least, engage with peers and collaborate with others. There are numerous networks of investors which can, around the globe, with a lot of different faith affiliation, we can support your journey. There is some interfaith network and some specific faith network, and some being on the, we also mentioned the GIN, the Global Impact Investing Network, which is launching actually, I think today, the faith repository on their website with a kind of publicly available database of documents which is published to move the, to help you to move the portfolio. So to conclude, and I think we spoke too long already, or I spoke too long already, I would like to encourage you to action. I think we think that FBOs have a really great potential in moving the sustainability transition forward. That grassroots action has led by faith community and faith leaders has been successful in moving capital from harm into positive impact in the past. And we are here to help, and happy to answer any question at the end of the presentation. Abby, back to you. Sorry.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Karina. Before we open for questions, we have one more video to share from the Parliament of World Religions called The Turning Point. So Asmara or Sophia, I think we are ready to share that. Sophia, are you able to share that video? Thank you. We're not able to hear it at this point. We're still not able to hear it.
Apologies, I'll try to fix this issue.
Great. While we're getting the sound to work, if you have questions or comments for anyone on the panel, please feel free to put it in the chat. In just a moment, we'll have a short time for question and answer. Though it is always good to connect offline as well. There is a question in the chat, Sophia, about whether or not all of these pieces are going to be available later on and where that would be. And Marina, perhaps if you unmute yourself, we will be able to hear it. We're still not able to hear it, but we can read the words, perhaps. Thank you, Marina. Thank you for that powerful video and for those moments of silence. So we do have a couple of minutes for questions and answers for any of the speakers. So I'm going to look in the chat to see if there are any questions for the panelists. But first, let me say thank you so much to each of you for your perspectives and experiences and your calls to action. It will be possible to access some of the resources that Sophie and Karina shared on their website. Marina, if it would be possible for you to share the link to the video in the chat, we would appreciate that. I'm not currently seeing other questions in the chat, but I'm going to give folks a moment to add questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Oh, Sophie, go ahead. I see that you're raising your hand, so go ahead.
Sorry, I was on mute. I found thanks, Abby, for making that happen, and I found that very inspiring to see all the different perspectives. And a lot of the investors we're talking to have public equity and maybe investing in this horrible company, like we heard, with this, which are active in building these pipelines in in Africa. Or so I was wondering, for instance, does the grassroots movement, and this is a question for Reverend Marsh, does the grassroots movement is also engaging with the groups who are actually trying to voice the interfaith shareholder engagement, the one we are in trying to vote resolutions and to support this breach of human rights. So, there are a lot. I'm thinking about the group like the ICCR or the IESG, which is the interfaith advocate for social justice in the United States. So is it a way, can we link this group together of the voice, grassroots voice, with this shareholder voice of the faith organization?
Yeah, I'm sure that's a good idea. I mean, we partner as Green Anglicans, we partner with Green Faith and with Faith Invest and some of the other investment, faith investing people. I'm sure Abby would be the right person to connect.
Yes. Oh, Rachel, we've lost you.
When I said you could do the connecting.
Connecting, but
yeah,
I think
I'm sure we can connect.
Because this is, if we can link this grassroots with someone, it may not be always easy, but and obviously they are invested in this oil company, so this is not a disinvest, but they're trying to make the change and to support the transition. Where Niklas, you see that in what you present, there is a way we need also to transit this company and to make actually a just transition which takes social right and human right and in account. So I think that could be also something very interesting for spreading the voice.
Yeah, because I think the grassroots stories are very important for faith investors. A lot of the faith organizations, they do have synods or decision-making bodies who will make decisions about funding. And then if the real life stories can be brought from these communities, I think it really helps people to understand my money is not, because people say, oh, but our faith, that we need the money to do good work. But if you realize that your money is doing bad work on the other side of the world, then that actually helps you to make the decision to pull it out.
Yeah. I'm happy to introduce people from ICCR, ICG. I don't know if it's not been done then, and we know as an example, this is two group of very strong shareholder engagement.
Yeah. Actually, later this week, Marin and I are part of a climate finance launch that actually Rachel and Green Anglicans have co-sponsored as well around climate finance, and ICCR is one of the presenters on that launch. Yeah. Beth, I wonder if you want to respond to that as someone who is thinking about like Finance Accelerator and connecting grassroots people of faith, people of spirit with different ways of financing.
Sure. Yes. It's, I am a 20-year experienced fundraiser for nonprofits and have seen the downfalls of restrictive funding coming from organizations that don't necessarily align with our worldview and our approach to community building, and really just when you like, let's just say when you get a gift or a grant of unrestricted capacity building, if you will, or operating money, like that is a game changer. But the hurdles and obstacles to get there are so fraught with, just with all these issues. And so And then also truly Indian country, Native American tribes, indigenous communities are so incredibly different with their initiatives and their structures. Even, within my own community, the Nottoway tribe, we are interfaith within our own community. So we have very conservative Christians, we have very traditionalist people. I fall more on the traditional side, and we interact in a real balanced approach because we have to, acknowledge all of the centuries of impressions and influences that have happened. So it's really complicated. Funding structures are complicated. Identities are really complicated. There's a question in here that talks about how do you engage local faith community members in these environmental efforts. And so I'll try to sync these two questions together. One, it's you got to find the champion within the community that's willing to take on this work, gardening work or farming work or any type of seed keeping work. And that's not necessarily your leadership. If you go to chiefs or councils, that person might not be on those bodies. And so there's really that the grassroots efforts begins with somebody who has a lot of passion and spirit for this work, really gets involved in it. And then they start to see what do they need. You have to match the needs with what you have. And so for some communities, it might mean they just need the seeds. Another community might need equipment. Another community might need access to land. And so really starting with that individual, like what do you need? What does your community need? And giving them the support so that they can carry that message up to their leadership. And in that process, we hope that we can start to investigate and align them with what's going to make most sense in terms of financial resources. And so we want to be able to support the individual and say, like, hey, if you already are growing this tomato, that is amazing. And y'all know if you grow tomatoes that they're going to be growing and producing, you could conceivably get a ton of seeds out of that. It might not be your indigenous endangered native seed, but it might be something you're really great at. We'll buy that seed off of you and give you some pocket cash, do whatever you want. But that's the very smallest scale. And we are hoping that with this financing arm that we're building with the Benefit Corporation and subsequent foundation, that on these larger projects, we want to be, I've been a grant writer for a very long time. I want to be on the other side of the table. I want to distribute funding. I want to be the one that says, I see what you're going through. I'm going to take away the red tape. I'm going to give you this unrestricted grant, this funding, this financing. I'm going to not require heavy reporting. I'm not going to require these big things. And so it's really tackling very big problems. But what we've seen is that we can tackle these big problems by building relationships, identifying needs, and then establishing different mechanisms that are going to support this work, recognizing that it can be as powerful as one individual, that spark that's hopefully going to just keep, pardon the pun, but keep growing within these communities. So Nawe for the question.
Thanks, Beth. And I appreciate you connecting the individual with the collective. As we draw to the end of our time together, I want to thank all of the panelists for your time and your expertise and your stories and the heart and spirit that you brought to our time together. And to each of the attendees, thank you for your time and patience, and for all the questions and comments in the chat. So thank you so much for joining us on this panel and for spending time learning together about grassroots interfaith action for climate justice. Thank you to Nicholas and Beth and Marin and Karina and Sophie and Rachel. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day and evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.